The ghost then, interestingly, starts with the phrase, "Do not forget," which is fascinating because the last thing he said to Hamlet is, "Remember me." And then now he comes back and says, "You said you were going to remember me, and you did not. You seem to have forgotten. Do not forget," he says, "this visitation is but to whet thy blunted purpose." And he refers to Hamlet's purpose as like a sword that's gone dull that he needs to sharpen up. And then that's all he says. There's not too much rebuke to Hamlet. And then before he knows it, he turns and he looks at Gertrude and he says, "Oh, but look, amazement on thy mother sits, so step between her and her fighting soul." He feels sorry for Gertrude, which is very interesting because the theme of Hamlet's whole rant at his mother recently, through the first part of the scene, was, "You're the worst. What kind of person are you? You're terrible." And the king, instead, who is the most wronged by her, as wronged as Hamlet is, he takes one look at her and he's just like, "Oh, look at her. She looks so upset. Don't make her feel bad." And I think it's a very interesting insight and window into the nature of love, in the sense that it can be very blinding. The king, even after everything Gertrude has done and all the ways he should be angry at her, he takes one look at her and he just can't. He just feels this incredible sense of love and pity for her. So Hamlet goes over to his mother and he's like, "How you doing? How is it with your lady?" And she says, "Alas, how is it with you?" She's like, "I'm not the one talking to empty space, right? How is it with you that you do bend your eye on vacancy and with the incorporeal air do whole discourse?" She's like, "You're literally looking at nothing and talking to empty space." And she goes on to tell him, "Your hair is standing on end and your eyes are popping out of your head." She's like, "You need to calm it down there, my son." "Whereon do you look?" she asks. "What are you looking at?" And he says, on him. Like, how do you not see what I'm seeing? Look you how pale he glares. His form and cause conjoined, preaching to stones would make them capable. He says, literally, if stones were looking at what I was looking at, they would come to life somehow, impossibly, miraculously. And then he turns to his father, who's just kind of like looking at him with this piteous look. And he says, do not look upon me, lest with piteous action you convert my stern effects. Then what I have to do will want true color, tears, perchance for blood. He then says, I was sad for a very long time about your death, and I was finally converting all of that into anger. I said I could drink hot blood and do such bitter business as the day would quake to look on. And now here you are back as a ghost, and you're looking at me, and you're making me sad. He's like, I'm going to end up crying instead of fighting right now, and I need to have the nerve to go find Claudius and kill him. Please don't look at me. The queen watches all of this and says, to whom do you speak this? Who are you talking to? And Hamlet says, seriously, do you see nothing there? Nothing at all, she says, yet all that is I see. Please mark this line. Fascinating. She claims that all you can see with your eyes is all that there is to see, and yet everything in this play has proven the opposite. Nothing is what you can see with your eyes. Everybody has a scheme that's being hidden by their true behavior. Everyone has a sort of character trait that they're hiding, right? Claudius is smiling and being a villain. Hamlet is putting on an antic disposition. There are literally people hiding behind the tapestries that you cannot see, that you accidentally stab through and kill them. There are people watching you in all of your private conversations. There are people sugaring over the devil with pious action. There are people walking around reading Bibles, looking all sweet and holy when they are anything but. There are people praying and seeming to ask for forgiveness when in fact their thoughts did not go up to heaven because they were fake. Nothing is what you see. And yet Gertrude wrongly claims that all that you see in front of you is all there is. And if the play has been anything, it's been a rebuke of that statement, right? It's nothing but seeming. And Hamlet says, nor did nothing hear? You didn't hear anything? And she says, no, nothing but ourselves. And he says, why, look you there. Look how it steals away. My father in his habit as he lived. He says, do you not see him? He's literally walking out the door right now, dressed exactly as he always did when he was alive. No, nothing. And then the ghost disappears. And she says, this is the very coinage of your brain. You're losing your mind. You're seeing things. And he's like, no. Don't you dare say that to me. He's like, literally, take my pulse. My pulse keeps time as well as yours. And frankly, ask me anything about what just happened. I will the matter reword. He's like, I will say it as clearly as possible, which if I was really crazy, right, madness would gamble from, I would be ranting. He says, no. Mother, for love of grace, lay not that flattering unction to your soul that not your trespass, but my madness speaks. He's like, oh, wouldn't it be convenient for you if you could be like, oh, well, he's just crazy. I don't have to listen to anything he said. Why would he say that? Because he knows that would be a very convenient way to wash away all the ugliness that he just held up for her, and she just had a very difficult time. And she was saying, your words are entering my ears like daggers, and you're cleaving my heart in half, and you're hurting me. And she doesn't say that part yet. And she would be very convenient just to dismiss everything he said as the rantings of a madman. He's like, no, you don't get off that easy. And then he uses a very interesting metaphor for her denial. He says, it will but skin and film the ulcerous place, whilst rank corruption mining all within infects unseen. He's like, you can go ahead and take something that is essentially an emotional abscess. It's like some kind of like deep infection, and you can just plaster over the top of it because you don't want to look at it because it's too ugly to see all the corruption inside. He's like, but it's the same, it's the equivalent of taking that wound and just covering over the surface, because you know what's going to happen, he says? You can just pretend it's not continuing to fester and go deeper and deeper inside underneath that, but it is. So he's like, that is the emotional, the physical equivalent to denial. Denial is essentially just covering over something that's really there, that's hurting you inside, that's digging deeper and deeper the whole time. And he then again uses that very interesting language of the rank corruption. Again, we've heard that word a lot from him. And he's kind of saying the longer that you deny it, the longer you refuse to kind of clean out that ugliness and move on, as hard as it is, as painful as it is, to face what you've done, the worse it is in the long run for you, because it will burrow in deeper and hurt you. He says, here's my formula for you. Confess yourself to heaven, repent what's past, avoid what is to come, and do not spread the compost on the weeds to make them rancor. And there's that word again, right? He goes all the way back to his first soliloquy and says, you're responsible. Remember when I said the world is an unweeded garden? He's like, you're the one putting compost on the weeds so that they just keep growing up worse and worse. So he says to her, here's the formula. Repent for what you did, confess what you did, repent for the past, stop what you're doing in the future, and you can finally move on and cleanse yourself. She then says to him, oh, Hamlet, thou hast cleft my heart in twain. She's like, you have literally sliced my heart in two by telling this to me. And he's like, good. Throw away the worser part of it and live the purer with the other half. He's like, good, because half your heart was rotten anyways. So why don't you just get rid of that part and live your life better with just the good part. Then he has some final advice. He says, okay, good night, but go not to my uncle's bed. He's like, do me a favor, don't go to Claudius's bed tonight. And then please mark this next line, assume a virtue if you have it not. So he then says, this isn't assume like make an assumption, but rather put on a virtue, pretend that you have a virtue that you do not. And what he means by this is, as we've said, it's very interesting. He doesn't like when people pretend to be things that they're not, except when they're doing it for the right reasons, when they're doing it for a good purpose. In other words, like him, he's putting on his antic disposition, the better to get to truth, the better to achieve a virtuous aim. So he's saying, okay, you're clearly not, good on the inside just yet. So you know what? Pretend you're good. That's not a bad thing. Pretend you're good so that you can become good. The intention behind is that not to pretend so that you can be fake, but rather pretend so you can become good. And then he does a little interesting riff on what would now be considered, behavior therapy. And he says, that monster custom, who all sense doth eat of habits devil, is angel yet in this. He says, here's the crazy thing about the human personality. Habit is a kind of devil that dominates us, right? We can't help it. We get stuck in habits. And he refers to it as literally a monster, that monster custom, that all sense doth eat. It stops us being rational. Like when we have a habit, we just have to keep doing it, even if we don't want to. And he says, but here's the good news. Just the way we are creatures of habit and the cycle can turn this way on something bad, he says, I have good news for you. The same thing can happen with something good. If you start doing something good, you just keep doing something good. He's like, we are creatures of habit. So he's like, use that to your advantage. Refrain tonight. And that shall lend a kind of easiness to the next abstinence, the next more easy. He's like, literally, it's like behavior therapy. Each time you do it, it gets a little bit easier. And if you just stick with it, that will become the new habit. He says, for use can almost change the stamp of nature and exorcise the devil or throw him out with wondrous potency. He's like, you can literally, people who have an addiction or something, he's like, that monkey on your back, you can actually get it out of your life. It's possible. You can throw it out. But it requires that you do the right thing every day until it gets easier. Okay. Then as he looks down at Polonius, which this whole time he's just ignored that there's been like a dead body bleeding out on the floor. And he says, oh yeah, about that guy, I do repent. but heaven hath pleased it so to punish me with this and this with me. So he has this interesting kind of fatedness that he embraces, where he says, I guess God wanted it this way, that I would be punished with the act of killing him, and he would be punished with being killed by me. So we'll come back to that in Act 5. He says, I will bestow him and answer well the death I gave him. He's like, I'm not going to try to hide from this. I will admit to what I did, and I will face the music. So again, good night. I must be cruel only to be kind. One of the famous lines in the play. He says essentially, I'm not trying to be mean for the sake of being mean, mother, but rather sometimes people need tough love. If this has seemed cruel to you, I'm not being cruel for the sake of it, but rather ultimately to redeem you so that ultimately your life will be better. Thus bad begins and worse remains behind. He's like, but this is only the beginning. If you think this is bad, just you wait what's in store. So the queen says, okay, what do you want me to do? And Hamlet says, here's what I want you to do. I want to make sure that no matter what happens, if the king with his little disgustingness, he comes and he tempts you into his bed and pinch wanton on your cheek and call you his mouse and let him for a pair of reachy kisses or paddling in your neck with his damn fingers, make you to ravel all this matter out, that I am essentially not in madness, but mad in craft. He's like, whatever you do, don't let him manipulate you and get it out of you that I'm not really crazy, I'm just fake crazy. And she's thinking to herself, that is not going to be a problem because I actually think you're crazy. She says, but be thou assured, if words be made of breath and breath of life, I have no life to breathe what thou hast said to me. She's like, you got it, secret safe with me. Hamlet then says, surprisingly, I must to England, you know that? No one has told Hamlet this. So this once again illustrates the fact that Hamlet, apparently, just like everyone else, Claudius is spying on Hamlet, Hamlet's spying on Claudius, everyone's got their like little planted, spies and moles all over the place. This information has made its way to him somehow. And she says, oh yeah, I forgot about that. That's what we did decide. And Hamlet says, oh yeah, there are letters sealed. And my two schoolfellows, meaning Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, whom I will trust as I will adders fanged, they bear the mandate and must marshal me, and they must sweep my way and marshal me to Knavery. He then says, I trust those two guys like I trust a snake with their fangs out. And again, the image of the snake particularly relevant because of the nature of that sort of, not just the biblical illusion of the snake, but our associations with snakes as being particularly sneaky, slithery creatures, backstabbing as he views Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. And he's like, that's fine, let it work. He's like, I love it. For 'tis sport to have the engineer hoist with his own petard. He's like, it's so fun when you can blow people up with their own bomb. He says, and it shall go hard, but I will delve 1 yard below their minds and below them at the moon. He's like, they think they're setting a trap for me? Oh, no. I'm going to find where their trap is, and I'm going to set a trap that's before their trap so that I catch them before they can ever do anything to me. So once again, this entire play, unfortunately, nobody ever just comes up to someone and says, you did me wrong, I want to fight you. Not yet. That's coming up. But unfortunately, everyone goes about everything in the most roundabout way possible, right? By indirections, find directions out, Polonius has said earlier. So Hamlet is still not going to face this head on, but rather he's going to somehow outsmart Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Oh, 'tis most meet when most sweet when in one line two crafts directly meet. He's like, I love it. This is so perfect. And then he turns to Polonius. He's like, ugh, I'll lug the guts into the neighbor room. So he then starts to what a disrespectful phrase, lug the guts. And he starts dragging Polonius out, literally leaving this little blood street trail behind him. Poor Gertrude, so traumatizing. And he says, mother, good night. And then his final sort of eulogy on Polonius, again, very disrespectful, is, indeed, this counselor is now most still, most secret, and most grave, who was in life a foolish, prating knave. He's like, well, this guy finally shut up. All in his life, he couldn't stop talking like an idiot, and now he is most still and most grave meaning both serious and in the grave now. Come, sir, to draw towards an end with you. Good night, mother. And out he goes with Polonius. We will talk at the beginning of the next act as well how interesting it is that he has sort of this very glib, sort of flippant approach to dealing with death, when death is not at all something that he finds funny. And yet from now through to the end of the play, there will be a lot of flippancy in regards to death, and we'll reflect a little bit on why that might be. And we will also review before the beginning of next class, what are the many things that are now left to be resolved between Acts 4 and 5, because many things have been set in motion, everything from how is Ophelia going to react to the death of her father, to is Claudius going to get to Hamlet before Hamlet gets to Claudius, right? What's going to happen? Is he getting on a ship to England tonight, or is he going to go get to Claudius first? Many, many, many questions, right? Is his mother going to keep his secret? Does she actually think he's crazy? We don't know. Acts 4 and 5 will tell us. See you soon.